Avocet. I've known Mike for a number of years. He's going to tell you briefly about his story and his passion that he particularly has in between. I'll have a word with you. So Mike, it's over to you.
Okay, good morning everyone. Could I just, before I start, can I just do a little bit of a straw poll? Have we got any real lobster fans in here? Yeah, so we've got, and anybody not tasted lobster? Not had lobster before? Right, a couple of you? Okay, so we'll make sure you can try some at the end. So, as Mark David said, I'm Mike Warner, and all my life I've had a passion for seafood, local seafood, but really these days anywhere in the UK is local, the transport we have, but eating seafood is all about seasonality. I grew up near Felixstowe Ferry back in the 1960s and 70s, and I spent most of my weekends and holidays crewing for a local fisherman friend of my father's, catching lobster and crab in the summer, lobster pots, and then long-lining for cod and skate in the winter months. So an idyllic childhood really, sort of, and that salt water infused into my veins, and it's been with me ever since. So 30, 40 years down the line, here I am, talking and writing about seafood, and it's really not a bad job actually. It's all around the country, talking to fishermen, and the great thing about it is that I end up connecting the fisherman to the consumer, because as you'll know and appreciate, there's a massive disconnect between the fishing industry and the seafood that we actually eat on our plates. Fishermen are notoriously bad for telling their own story. I mean, they really are. You know, they come in, they land a catch, off they go to sea again, having had a few pints in the local, and they're really not interested in going out there on social media. Well, some of them are getting better. So I thought, well, if I go and talk to the fishermen and I find out what they're doing, I can then go back to you, the consumers, and tell this wonderful story of traceability and sustainability and great provenance in a way which people can understand. But lobsters really are my thing. I mean, to say I grew up with lobsters, probably not really the right thing to say, but I have known them all my life, ever since my father, who used to go down to the low tide, onto the rocks at low tide at Felixstowe. When I was about 3 years old, he came walking up the garden path with a massive flapping blue lobster in his hand. I was transfixed, and here we are, all those years later, and I'm still talking about the bloody thing. So, anyway, down to business. Keith Floyd, the dear, late, and great Keith Floyd, do you remember Floyd on Fish, the TV series? Yeah. Had this wonderful way with the camera, but also he knew his fish inside out. Great hero of mine. You know, he's a precursor to Rick Stein and all the other Nathan Outlaw, all the other fishing greats that we love listening to on television. Keith Floyd had an ability to actually tell that story because he knew so much about his product. And he came out with a very good quote, which is in his Floyd on Fish book of the series. And it said, when it comes to eating seafood, we have lost our grandparents' nerve. And I think that's true. I really do think that people are not scared of eating fish and shellfish, but they're just reticent to perhaps try and prepare the whole fish or the whole shellfish from raw ingredients. And what I'm trying to do is dispel the myths and make sure that people realise that these are abundant, they're sustainable. It's the same with mussels, and cockles, and clams, and whelks, and all the other wonderful shellfish we have, and the whitefish and the oilfish too. They're all available. Yes, sometimes they're pricey, but if you look for the right product at the right time of year, when they're seasonally abundant, then it's very, very cheap, nutritious, very important, healthy, and good for well-being seafood. So, the lobsters. This is a native lobster. This is what we catch around the coast here, and indeed all around the British Isles. Homerus gammarus, not to be confused with the imported American species, Homerus americanus, which you might see in some supermarkets at knockdown prices at Christmas. These are much more flavoursome. Wonderful fish. Here we catch them, start probably May, June time, and they will go on through the season until probably the end of September or early October, when the fishermen bring their pots ashore and then wrap up for another year. But in some parts of the UK, down in Cornwall and parts of Scotland, they actually catch them all year round, which is good. The trouble is, because they're a seasonal species, the price goes like this, fluctuates all over. So you might say, native lobsters, British lobsters, far too expensive for me. Well, at certain times of the year they probably are. But actually if you hit them in the summer months, when obviously we've got a lot at the moment, our stalls over there, come and see us later, you know, they're really not too bad. You know, these, I mean, if you went and had a takeaway curry on a Saturday night, you know, you would not be out of pocket with these two. whereas a curry would probably cost you another 10 or 15 quid. So that's the way I look at it. Good, sustainable native seafood, very nutritious, and you can prepare it very easily, which I'm going to show you now. So, before I start cooking and cutting things up, I thought I'd tell you about the catch process. So this is a lobster pot. This is a brand spanking new one of mine. Not that I have many lobster pots, but I do fish a few on my boat at Felixstowe Ferry. And this is the gear we use. So this is what they call a parlour pot, 32-inch parlour pot. And it's called a parlour pot because it's got two different chambers. So you've got the entry chamber here, and at this end you've got the trapping chamber or the parlour. Okay, and these two things do not call the gable ends. So what we do is we set these out in shanks of anything from, well, it could be single pots, but shanks up to 8, 10, even 20 some fishermen use when they're fishing commercially. They're strung together by lengths of rope, and they're weighted up, so they sit to the bottom, they sit on the seabed. The fishermen will put them out, and then they will mark them with a Dan, D-A-H-N, or a buoy, and a cork line either end of the shank, so if the boat comes and takes one off, you can always find the other end. So you've got two marker buoys which you can find your lobster pots with, and they fish them sometimes very, very close inshore. I mean, if you go down to places like Alde or to Felixstowe, you can sometimes see the marker buoys just floating literally yards off. I mean, when I was a lad, I mean, my pots sometimes on a good low tide would actually, they'd be awash at low water because we were fishing on the rock quite close in. But of course, the fishermen go offshore as well. So before the pot goes in the water, it needs some bait to attract the lobsters in. So in this part of the world, what we tend to do is use salted herring, which we catch in season from October through the winter months. We salt the herring down and put it in a container where it sits there preserved. And then we take the salted herring out come the lobster season, and we fit them in here, which is the bait string. So we get a couple of good smelly salted herring, because lobsters do like a good smelly herring to attract them in. We put them in there, we shove the knock down on the herring, we shut the door up, and then we chuck it over the side with the Dan and the cork line and everything, and we leave it down there for 2 or 3 days, or a week, or whatever the weather will let us. Sometimes we then get back for 2 or 3 weeks. Good thing is, the lobsters stay in there because they can't get out. They go in through these things called the eyes. These are the eyes. Some pots have soft eyes, which is they don't have this hard plastic ring. What we found was that with soft eyes in this part of the world, we have a rather voracious predator in the sea called the grey seal. And grey seals love raiding pots. And they will come down and they will ram their head in there, and if it's a soft eye, they will go right through, they'll take the salted herring, they'll take the lobsters, they'll take the crabs, everything. So the hard eyes, good way of stopping Mr. Seal going through and raiding your catch. So baited up, these get chucked into the water, and then when we go back to pick them up, we get hold of the Dan as we go alongside, days later or whatever. Most fishermen have a hydraulic hauler, so it's very easy. They put the rope on the hauler, and the hydraulics actually do all the back-breaking heavy work. Pots come up alongside, they get stacked, rebaited, lobsters come out into a box, and then the whole process is repeated. Okay? So this is a brand new pot, one of mine, and hasn't been used yet, but I thought it's much better to bring it here for demonstration purposes. So we'll put him back down there. I must add, actually, that it's not just the lobsters we get in there, we get all kinds of things in there. I had a Dover sole a few weeks ago, we get eels, we get cuttlefish, wrasse, we get all kinds of crabs and whelks and hermit crabs, and it's fascinating because I'm in awe of these things, but you never quite know what's going to come up. So you pull the pod up and over the side and there could be absolutely nothing. And the next one could be 3, 4, 5 lobsters, a fish, and it's so fascinating. So that's the catch. Oh yes, one thing I ought to tell you about lobsters is a good way of describing them is they're the caretaker of the seabed. They move around and they do an ever such a good job. They clear up all the dead, decaying fish, and they do a real good cleaning job, especially in the rocky areas where they like to live. The females will lay thousands and thousands of eggs, and they will incubate them under their tail, under this bit here. It's actually a female, it is female. the eggs will lay in there, and they're called berries, actually, and they will keep them for about 9, 10, 12 months. And the berries will slowly turn colour from a sort of palish to a black to a red when they're actually ready to hatch. And then the female lobster will release those eggs, those berries, and they will go out and spread into the water column where they'll live for as plankton, hatching out for probably 5 to 10 weeks, something like that. And then they descend again to the seabed, where they find a little burrow. They go in there for about 2 years, and they stay in the burrow for 2 years before they then are big enough, probably about that size, before they then move off and go and live in the rocky areas all around our shores. These ones are probably, I mean, that's just about a sizable lobster. The way of how we tell the minimum landing size of a lobster is we measure them across the carapace here. So from the end of the carapace to the back of the eye socket, which is just there, that has to be a minimum of 87 millimetres. Anything under that, they go back over the side. And that's all about preserving the lobster populations for the coming generations. And fishermen these days are very passionate about making sure that we do rejuvenate our stocks, not just of lobsters but of other fish as well. And they design their gear now to be very selective so that we do protect the juvenile stock and we do carry enough forward for future generations. One thing we're not very good at protecting is actual fishermen themselves. So a lot of them are actually going out of business because they make so very little money, especially the inshore fleet around here, which I'm also passionate about. So the caretakers of the seabed, they are, I mean, they're more abundant now than I remember when I was a boy. I mean, I've caught probably 40 or 50 decent sizable lobsters myself in my few pots this year, and I've put probably twice as many back. Nice young fish, all coming on, ready to bite another day. So that's really encouraging, and that's what I mean about sustainability. You know, you can go and eat these things with passion and confidence that they're not disappearing, they're not being overfished, they are sustainable, and you can eat them quite confidently. Down in Cornwall, anybody been to Padstow, the National Lobster Hatchery? Yeah, okay, so you know what I'm talking about there. National Lobster Hatchery, set up in 2004, fantastic example of marine conservation at its best. It's one of those bodies which is a leading light in the seafood industry, and they will take the buried hens, the pregnant females. I must add, actually, fishermen aren't allowed to land the pregnant females, the buried hens. They must all be returned to the water. But the lobster hatchery has a dispensation for fishermen to land them, and then they take them to the hatchery, and then they actually strip the eggs out. They allow the eggs to come off naturally at hatch time, and then the eggs, the little baby lobsters, are collected up individually. They're siphoned off with a water supply, and then they're collected up, and they're grown on in little hives, they call them, which is quite a nice little word. They're like a hexagonal thing with lots of individual pockets, and the baby lobsters are put in there, and they will grow them on to a size where they can be released again back into the wild. And that happens in Cornwall, all around the Cornish Peninsula, from Mounts Bay and the Foul Estuary, right round to Port Isaac in the north. And the fishermen there are delighted because in the years that the hatchery has been returning lobsters to the water, they have noticed that stocks have absolutely increased, tenfold, and it's great for the industry down there. We'd like one up here, but I think that's a long time coming. So we've talked about the catch, the methods, the bait, and the habitat. What else can I tell you about where the lobsters live? Well, they do like the rocky ground, I must admit. They tend to, they're quite territorial. The little lobsters will come inshore and use our inshore waters as a bit of a nursery area. You get them in the river, down at Orford and down at Felixstowe, you'll find little lobsters. They'll come up into the river and in quite numbers because they feel safe and protected, and there's lots of feed for them, so little fish and fry, also using those estuaries as nursery areas. But the bigger ones tend to live offshore, and of course they are quite aggressive to each other and territorial, so they fight each other. So if you find a bit of rocky ground where there are big lobsters, you won't usually find the little ones because they're all scared off, and then when you fish the big ones out, then the little ones move back in again, and the whole cycle repeats. It's quite fascinating, really. So, I've got some water boiling here. Anybody really that squeamish? Because I'm going to cook a lobster now, so anybody want to just turn the No, that's excellent. So these I'm going to sort of prep up in a minute, but I thought we ought to, if we're going to do the job properly, we ought to cook one as well. So, Oh, were you? Yeah, I think it's very quiet, David. Or have I just been gabbling?
You're doing what you do best, and it's fascinating, so please carry on.
Okay, I'll gabble along. So, where is he? Oh, okay. Right, so, there we go. Nice and fresh. So that's one of them in its raw state. A lot of people, see lobsters in the pink when they're cooked and get quite confused, and then when they see a live one, they think, well, it's not the lobster I remember. Well, that's because these things have a pigment in them called astaxanthin, which, when the water temperature is raised significantly, will go that beautiful lobster pink. Otherwise, they are this colour, they're predominantly blue-black, but the colour will vary depending on the ground they're on. So in clear water at Cornwall, sometimes you get a lot more almost yellowing down the bottom here. There's a bit of sand on the bottom, again they'll adapt. And their shell is built up of calcium, so they're able to adapt the colour and the finish of their shells according to the bottom that they're living on. I would also say that lobsters, they shed their skin. When they're young, they'll probably shed their skin 5 or 6 times a year, and as they go through adult life, this is probably about a 5 to 6 year old lobster, perhaps a little bit more, and he'll probably be shedding every other year. And when they shed their skin, a new one grows underneath, and they probably consume another 25% of their body weight with the new shell. When they actually molt, they force seawater into their bodies, and it cracks off the old shell, so the old one actually comes apart, and the new, very, very tender skin, vulnerable lobster will slip out. When he slips out of that old shell, he's then a target for predators, so large cod, bass, anything like that will come and hoover him up. So that's why they like the rocky ground, because they can then get back under a little crevice or into a rocky sort of overhang, and then their shell, allowing time for the shells to harden up. Very old lobsters, I mean, they will grow up to 50, 60, 70 years old, will probably molt seldom then. I mean, they will probably every 10 years, they're growing at a much slower rate. I think the record for a lobster is about 20-something kilos. It was massive, caught in 1931 in Foy in Cornwall. But they regularly grow up to 3-4 kilos, this sort of size, and a lot of the fishermen will go and target wrecks with their pots, because that's where a lot of the larger lobsters actually live. They get into the actual hull of the ship and will stay in there. And divers have reported going down onto wrecks and finding lobsters so big they're backed into a crevice and they can't actually move, so they've got their claws just sitting out and just grabbing stuff as it goes past, but they can't actually move out of the hole they backed into because they've grown into it. So, we're going to cook this lobster now, and as I said, anybody who's particularly squeamish can look away, nice. Lobsters have to go into boiling water to cook them. I prefer, and being a very traditional, growing up by the sea sort of guy, I prefer to cook them in seawater. If I can get it, it's far the best way of cooking shellfish. Clean seawater, obviously I wouldn't go to the bridge here and put a bucket in and cook, because that wouldn't be right. But good clean seawater, if you can get it, is eminently suitable for cooking any sort of shellfish here. Now, lobsters, there's a lot of myths about lobsters and cooking live lobsters, and I don't subscribe to any of them, I'm afraid. The main thing is that the lobster is dispatched and killed humanely before you put it into the boiling water, which I'm going to do now. Another way is to put them into the freezer. If you put them into the freezer for 10 minutes before you actually cook them, that takes their body temperature right down and they become very sluggish, and it's almost like a pre-med, if you like. There's an anaesthetic because they don't feel a thing when they go into the water. But this one I'm going to, and I'll do it over here so it's fine. So you take your knife and you kill it very, very quickly by plunging the knife behind the eye socket, and that will go right through their nervous system. Like that. And then we pop him in there. And that one, because he's a relatively small fish, will boil away for about 8 minutes, something like that. But in the meanwhile, while he's cooking, we'll have a look at these already ones that I did earlier, as they say. So dressing a lobster is actually, I think, or preparing a lobster, we call it dressing, much easier than preparing a crab. Crabs can be quite fiddly. Lobsters on the whole, and it depends what your end result is going to be. You know, personally, I like to eat a lobster cold, just boiled, cooled down with some nice new potatoes, some Jersey Royals, perhaps a little bit of early season asparagus and some hollandaise. And that's, I think, one of the best lobsters of the year for me. First one's out of the pot, and it can just be eaten simply, you savour the flesh, and it's a fantastic way. But of course, you can do them all kinds of ways: grilled with garlic butter, ceviche. You can put them into a risotto. In fact, if you look at my website, come over and I'll take a card later on. We've got some fantastic lobster recipes on the website from different chefs this summer. We started off with a lovely recipe actually for just a plain. Actually, it was a barbecued lobster with smoked butter from Charlotte Pike, who's going to be here today. She's one of our Guild Food Writers Vice Chairman. That was a lovely recipe. I then had Ed Baines from Randon Open in London. Donated me his Bashan curried lobster, which is, again, a lovely way of bringing it. Cyrus isn't here, is he? No, Cyrus Tollywaller would probably give me a better recipe, but that was a fantastic one. Great, it's a lovely meat. It will take spices up, take turmeric and things like that, which stiffens not that needs much stiffening of the flesh, but it really gives it a great base to absorb those spices, if you want to do that sort of thing. Yeah, he's on that boil and roll. It's fine.
He's just simmering away there very nicely at the moment. Slow rolling boil.
Reminds me of the Naughty Punkin Parents.
Yes.
Oh yes, and then Nathan Outlaw. Who knows Nathan Outlaw? Have you been to Nathan Outlaw's restaurant? Anybody in Cornwall? Fantastic seafood chef, one of my favourite chefs. Nathan donated me his lobster risotto recipe to go on for July, and that was a delight. And lobster risotto, I think, is one of the best ways of bringing out the lobster flavour. But you must use a very good stock. Lobster stock, actually, in the risotto for that, I think, is a bit strong. I think a better stock would be something like brown shrimps, which is nice and light, and just lovely. The rice just absorbs it up, and you put a bit of creme fraiche at the end there, and I can't put one down later, really, isn't it?
I think you're making us all hungry, Mike. Come on.
Yeah, and then a little dusting of freshly chopped coriander on the top, and then sliced lobster with orange shakers, which the citrus, funny enough, really did bring out the lobster flavour quite remarkably. We do. Right. So, breaking down your lobster is quite simple. What I do, if you're going to grill it, we'll do the dressing part in a minute. Let's prepare this one for grilling, which is really quite easy. You've got to split it down the middle. So you take the point of the knife. There's a little cross section there, like a little cross on a donkey, and you literally go through there, and then flatten the tail out. We don't have to flatten the tail out. Might be easier. Go right through, turn him round, back through the head, and there, actually, you've got your wonderful split lobster.
He did that rather well, didn't he?
I have done one too. But there's a couple of things you need to do to lobster before you actually put that onto the barbecue or grill or whatever you're going to do. There's this bit here, which is the stomach sac in the head. You just need, that's not very nice, so we just take that out. We'll take that as well. So obviously, gone through the middle of it, so we don't want to eat that. And then, down the tail of the lobster, you can see this red line here. That's what we call the coral, and that can come out, although you don't throw that away, you reserve that, because that actually goes, you can either eat it straight off, or you can make it into a rather nice sauce, or add it to your stock. But also, running down the tail of the lobster there is that dark vein. Can you see that? And that has to come out. It doesn't have to, but you're much better off if it does come out. And that's its digestive system, that's its digestive tract. So that needs to come out all the way down to its tail. out.
Sometimes it comes out really easily, and
Sometimes it doesn't.
It doesn't.
No, sometimes it comes out all in one, and sometimes we're fiddling around for ages.
It's a lovely feeling when it does come out.
Oh, it does. Yeah, absolutely. So that's ready to go on the grill, and what I do there is just season it up with a black pepper, and I just stick some garlic butter on there, or sort of normal butter, or some smoked butter, and go onto the grill, or indeed stick it onto the barbecue, or if you've got one of those great big green egg things, even better, because you can stick it on there and give it a smoke as well. That must be getting ready, isn't it? You've got a spoon, sort of spoon, David, something.
Behind you.
Have you got one up? Yes, Camp Chap to the rescue. Which one of your fine array of utensils shall we use? Ah, the perfect tool. Right, I'll see what I'll do. See my magic. So, right, now he's done. There we go. So, we just drain him off. Now, the important thing when you cook a lobster like that, and that had about 8 minutes, the important thing is that you let it cool naturally. Don't bung it straight in the fridge. That's not good. I was always taught just to let it sit there and just cool off before you until it's okay.
That's continuing the cooking process.
It's setting the meat, as I like to call it. So it just carries on literally cooking for a while, and then when it's cooked pretty much cold enough to handle, then it can go in the fridge, unless you want to eat it straight away. So we'll leave him cooling there for the moment, and we'll go back to these. Excuse me. Right, so there's your lobster ready to go on the barbecue. We'll take the bands off. They put the bands on lobster obviously to stop things fighting and destroying each other and ripping their various appendages off, because they, as I say, they are quite aggressive and quite territorial. When you put several together in a keep pot, so the fishermen will use a keep pot to store the lobsters in, they get banded just to make sure they don't do each other damage and spoil the catch. So, if I'm going to barbecue that, what I'll probably do is just give the claws a bit of a crack with the back of the knife. Like that.
Mike, there's both claws are different sizes. It's sort of like a right hand and a left hand.
The claws?
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, I should have explained that. The two different claws on a lobster. There's the club claw here, or the crusher claw, and the cutter claw. And what he uses those for is the club claw or the crusher claw is for gripping and crushing their prey, and the cutter claw, which has got a lot more teeth on it. You see the teeth on that, and that's used for literally nipping and slicing and cutting through flesh. So that's pretty much what they use them for. So just crack the claws, and then that would be ready to go on the barbecue or under the grill. Get out of the way. And then we've got this one here. We're going to just do something slightly different with this. So if you're going to take all the meat and extract that out of the lobster, say for a salad or something like that, or for a lobster roll or lobster cocktail or potted lobster, so we then start to dress it down, or undress it as my father used to say, and we take just literally, just gently pull those knuckles away, so we end up with a pile of claws and legs. They come away ever so easily.
It's a feature from it.
Just leave those there. We've got our two claws. Now, we can do exactly what we did with that. We can split that down the middle and take that and take the meat out that way. But what I'm going to show you another way that I often use myself, and that's literally to take the tail meat out on its own. So you just grab the head and the tail and just gently crack and pull, and then the whole tail comes away. I'll use the head in a minute. And that lobster tail, it's like a big scampi really, isn't it? You know, fantastic. You can use that again on a barbecue, or you can just take the meat out of the tail and then slice and put it whatever dish you want to.
That's the meat you'd use in a risotto.
That's what I go and use in the risotto. In fact, I'll chop this up as if I was going to put it in the risotto. Now you could slice down through that and cut it in half, but I like to actually have the meat in rounds and just take